I love a good rebellion. And most of the good Star Wars films are about a plucky rebellion rising up to take down an evil empire. Well, 6.3 is all about the resistance. Over the past week, we've been talking about how the West has risen up to be this unstoppable industrial powerhouse. But today, the people strike back. Let's review the indigenous responses to imperialism. I kind of just set this up like a classic underdog story, where the little guy finally rises up and takes down the evil empire. But today is more Rogue One than Return of the Jedi. And 5 of the 6 largest empires of all time reached their peak in this period. And that does not bode well for the indigenous people within those empires. And we went over all the reasons why the West was so dominant last week. In this section, the College Board gives you 11 illustrative examples covering 3 different topics. Those are 11 different examples that could illustrate how the indigenous people responded to the arrival of the West. But this is a review show. I'm not going over 11 topics. So I'll make it easy. Let's review 3 examples. 1 for each category from our good friends at the College Board. But before we get going, I want you to remember a little poem. Now, I say this in class over and over throughout this unit. And no matter how much you want these underdog stories to work out, they just won't. And you can look back to Unit 5 as to why the West was so powerful. Or you can remember this one line from a poem by author Hilaire Belloc. Whatever happens, we have got the Maxim gun, and they have not. The Maxim gun was a machine gun invented in 1884 by American inventor Hiram Maxim. While this wasn't the only reason the West dominated, it certainly didn't hurt. So think of the Maxim gun as a symbol for all the industrial and technological advantages the West brings with them. In fact, this should be your mantra in 6.3. Whatever happens, we have got the Maxim gun, and they have not. Whatever happens, the West is going to dominate. First example, direct resistance. My favorite example here is the War of the Golden Stool in 1900. This example has everything. British imperialism in Africa, British white man's burden, British social Darwinism, a golden stool. The Ashanti Kingdom existed on the edge of the British colony of the Gold Coast in modern-day Ghana. But this wasn't a new clash. The British had been fighting with the Ashanti for 70 years. But the final leg of the British-Ashanti Wars was fought over the British obsession with obtaining the Ashanti Golden Stool. What's the Golden Stool, you ask? It's a symbolic throne that symbolized the soul of the Ashanti. The dead, the living, and the yet-to-be-born all were symbolized in this stool. But the British saw the golden stool as a golden throne, and they felt that their queen, Queen Victoria, should be allowed to sit on the golden stool. The Ashanti disagreed, and they fought back. The supreme commander of the Ashanti was Ya Asantewaa. And she wasn't having any of this. She stood up directly to the Ashanti men for not fighting back hard enough. Now I have seen that some of you fear to go forward to fight for our king. If it were in the brave days, chiefs would not sit down to see their king take it away without firing a shot. No white man could have dared to speak to the chief of the Ashanti in the way the governor spoke to the chiefs this morning. Is it true that the bravery of the Ashanti is no more? I cannot believe it. It cannot be. I must say this. If you, the men of Ashanti, will not go forward, then we will. We, the women, will. I shall call upon my fellow women. We will fight the white men. We will fight till the last of us falls in the battlefields. Oh, man. Honestly, that's probably the best speech in the entire course. But remember, whatever happens, we have got the Maxim gun, and they have not. Ya Asantewaa was exiled, and the Ashanti remained under British control until the independence of Ghana in 1957. Best part? The British never get the stool. They finally just quit looking in 1921. Second example, there are some new states that are forming on the periphery of these empires. My favorite example, the Zulu Kingdom. The Zulu are notorious warriors in South Africa. They had a similar reputation for being fierce fighters as the Apache do in the Americas. The kingdom was founded by this man, Shaka Zulu. And these guys fought off the Dutch and the British for years. In fact, the Zulu Kingdom's most famous victory was over the British at the Battle of Isandlwana in 1879. The Zulus killed 1,000 British in one day. This was the largest defeat that the British had suffered at the hands of any indigenous people in their entire massive empire. The Brits won't have a day this bad again until World War I. But remember, whatever happens, we have got the Maxim gun, and they have not. The British turned their full imperial attention to the Zulus, leading to their eventual disbanding in 1897. Finally, the third way the indigenous people struck back was through rebellion. My favorite example here is the Xhosa cattle killing movement. Warning, this is super tragic. If you're unfamiliar with the Xhosa, you might know the Xhosa through Trevor Noah, the host of The Daily Show. He grew up in South Africa and is of half European and half Xhosa descent. Well, this rebellion is based on a Xhosa prophecy. The prophecy said that if the Xhosa killed their cattle and their crops, the dead would rise and throw the British settlers into the sea. You can probably imagine how this goes. And you'd be right. The famine that followed killed 75% of the Xhosa people in the area. So when you think of indigenous responses to imperialism in this period, think of the direct resistance of Ya Santawa and the Ashanti, the new Zulu state that formed in southern Africa, and the Xhosa cattle-killing rebellion. And of course, if you need to see them all in one place at one time, there is this map. Be careful though. I included the resistant movements from all of the modern period, both from Unit 5 and from Unit 6. You should have picked up on a theme today. The West is going to be super successful in empire building in this period. But what are the raw materials that the West is actually looking for? And how does all of this lead to global economic development? I'll see you tomorrow.